Deep in a forgotten stretch of the American countryside, hidden from the eyes of the world, a brutal act set the stage for an unforgettable story, one of cruelty, courage, and redemption. A weathered rancher named Roy Beckett, bitter from years of loss and hardship, came across a wild Mustang mare and her newborn foal trespassing on his land. Instead of compassion, he saw them as a nuisance. "Damn strays," he muttered, spitting in the dirt as he approached them with a coarse rope in hand. The mare, lean and trembling from the strain of childbirth, stood protectively over her foal. Her ears twitched at Roy's steps, sensing danger. But she didn't run. Her newborn couldn't stand properly yet, its legs wobbled under its own weight. With heartless efficiency, Roy looped the rope around the mare's neck, tugging her and the foal away from the open field. The baby stumbled, crying out with each jolt of the rope, but Roy kept dragging them toward the woods. After nearly half a mile, he stopped beneath a wide, gnarled oak tree. "This should keep you away from my land," he muttered as he tied the mare and foal tightly to the trunk. The ropes bit into the mare's skin. She flinched but didn't fight, her instincts focused on shielding her baby. Roy stepped back, admiring the twisted solution. "Let the wolves deal with you," he said coldly, turning his back as the last light of day disappeared behind the hills. As the sun vanished, the forest came alive with sound. The distant howls of wolves echoed like ghostly drums. The mare pulled at the ropes in desperation, her muscles straining. Each tug only tightened the knots. Her foal collapsed at her feet, shivering from fear and weakness. The wind shifted, carrying with it the smell of predators. Glowing eyes blinked in the shadows, watching. Stalking. The mare's breath came in heavy bursts. She let out a low, guttural whinny, her body trembling, hooves digging into the earth. Still tied, still helpless, but unwilling to give in. She bent her neck and nuzzled her foal, who let out a weak, heart-piercing cry. The sound floated through the trees. The wolves heard it too. And they were getting closer. The forest air thickened as night settled in. Every leaf rustled like footsteps. Every breeze sounded like breath. The Mustang mare, still bound to the old oak tree, stood with her body wrapped protectively around her foal. She was exhausted, but alert. Fear and instinct fueled her. The wolves were no longer just watching. They were circling. Their glowing eyes flickered like embers in the darkness, darting between bushes and tree trunks, drawing closer with every passing second. Low snarls echoed, the sound bouncing between the trees like a warning from the wild. The foal let out another soft cry. The mare answered with a fierce snort, stomping her hoof against the ground. She couldn't run. Couldn't fight the way she wanted to. But she would not let them take her baby without resistance. And just when all seemed lost, when the distance between hunter and prey was measured in heartbeats, hope arrived. Nearly 3 miles away, a young rancher named Caleb Morgan was mending a broken section of his fence. The hammer in his hand paused mid-swing as a sound drifted through the night air. A whinny. Not an ordinary one, but desperate. Hollow. A cry that crawled under his skin. He turned toward the wind, narrowing his eyes. Nothing but trees and shadows. Then he heard it again. Closer. Sharper. Caleb dropped his hammer and ran toward the stable. He grabbed his lantern and rifle, saddled his horse in a rush, and rode out into the darkness with only the haunting sound to guide him. His horse's hooves thudded against the dirt trail, weaving through dense forest paths and brush. The howls grew louder. Closer. Urgent. Caleb's gut tightened. He didn't know exactly what he was riding into, but something told him it wasn't just an animal in distress. There was something about that cry that sounded like a plea. Something that demanded he keep going. The lantern swung from his saddle horn, casting flickers of light onto the trail. The trees thinned briefly, revealing a clearing up ahead, and the unmistakable reflection of eyes. Dozens of them. Wolves. Caleb raised the rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. The crack echoed like thunder through the woods. The wolves scattered, startled by the sudden light and sound, but not gone. As the clearing lit up, Caleb's breath caught. There, trembling and bound, stood the mare. Bloodied rope cut into her neck, her legs muddy and raw. And beneath her, a foal, barely breathing. Caleb jumped down from his horse, boots hitting the wet earth with a thud. The air smelled of pine, sweat, and danger. His lantern illuminated the tragic scene, the mare's flanks heaving with exhaustion, the foal barely moving beneath her. "Easy, girl," Caleb said gently, holding the lantern high. "I'm not here to hurt you." The mare's eyes locked onto his, wild, defensive, but pleading. She didn't move. Couldn't. Her body was trembling, her legs shaking under her own weight. But still, she stood between him and her baby. Caleb knelt slowly, pulling a hunting knife from his belt. "I'm gonna help you," he murmured, more to soothe her than himself. With careful hands, he began slicing through the rope. The mare flinched as the tension snapped, but she didn't strike. Instead, she lowered her head slightly, just enough to show she was watching, but not attacking. The last strand came loose with a soft snap. She stumbled forward a step, nearly collapsing from the sudden release, but she caught herself. Her body swayed. Her chest rose and fell like a storm surge. Then, instinct kicked in, she turned to her foal and nudged him, desperate for signs of life. The foal stirred. Barely. Caleb's heart twisted. He knelt beside the little one, placing a steady hand on its fragile side. The foal was cold, weak, but alive. Its tiny heartbeat fluttered beneath Caleb's palm. "We've got to move," he said, standing quickly. "The wolves won't stay gone." In the distance, as if on cue, another howl rang out, closer this time. Caleb scanned the woods. Shadows moved. Shapes weaved through the trees. He looked at the foal, then at the mare. "I can carry him," he said, voice low and urgent. "But you've gotta come too. You've gotta trust me." The mare stood frozen for a breath, torn between instinct and uncertainty. Then she stepped forward. Caleb scooped the foal into his arms, his legs unsteady under the extra weight, and turned toward the waiting horse. The foal whimpered weakly, curling into Caleb's chest. Behind him, the mare followed. One slow, staggering step at a time. They had to move. Fast. Because the forest was waking. And the wolves were already circling back. Caleb's boots sank into the damp earth as he rushed toward his horse, the foal clutched tightly in his arms. Behind him, the mare, limping but determined, kept pace, her eyes flicking to every shadow in the trees. He could hear them now. The wolves were regrouping. Their howls had turned into growls, low and guttural. Branches snapped somewhere to his left. Yellow eyes flashed briefly in the darkness to his right. They were closing in. Caleb reached the horse and quickly secured the foal into a deep saddlebag he'd stuffed with a wool blanket. The little one let out a faint cry as Caleb tucked him in gently. The mare snorted sharply, stepping forward, protective. "I'm not leaving him," Caleb said, placing a firm hand on her neck. "You've got my word." Another growl, closer. Without wasting another second, Caleb swung into the saddle, rifle in one hand, reins in the other. He looked down at the mare. "Let's go." She didn't hesitate. The moment Caleb's horse turned toward the trail, the mare was at their side, her hooves thudding against the wet ground in rhythm with his. Behind them, the shadows came alive, snarls and rustling underbrush following in their wake. Then came the howl. A single, piercing cry that sent a bolt of fear through Caleb's spine. He fired a shot into the trees. The echo split the night, and for a moment, the sound stopped. But they didn't stop for long. The wolves surged from the brush, dark blurs cutting across the trail behind them. Caleb leaned forward, urging his horse faster. Go! Go! The mare ran beside them, her legs trembling from exhaustion but fueled by terror and something more powerful, maternal will. Mud splashed up their legs as they tore through narrow paths, low branches whipping past their faces. Caleb held the reins tight, the foal's tiny head poking slightly from the saddlebag, its eyes shut but chest rising. "We're almost there," he shouted over his shoulder, though he wasn't sure if it was to the mare, or to himself. Just ahead, the trees began to thin. He could see the edge of the forest. Beyond that, his land. Safety. A final burst of speed carried them through the last line of trees. As they broke into the open, the wolves skidded to a stop at the tree line, snarling, their eyes glowing in the lantern light Caleb had left around his fences. They didn't cross. Not yet. Not tonight. Caleb slowed the horse, panting hard, and turned to look at the mare. Her sides heaved, her chest rising and falling like a drumbeat of war and survival. But she was still standing. So was her foal. They had made it out alive. The first thing Caleb did was dismount. His legs were numb, his arms aching from holding the foal, but he moved quickly. He gently lifted the foal out of the saddlebag, cradling the trembling body against his chest. The mare pressed close, nearly brushing against him as he walked toward the barn. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now. Both of you." The barn doors creaked as he swung them open. Inside, it was warm and dry. The scent of hay, cedarwood, and old leather filled the air. It wasn't much, but compared to the forest, it was heaven. Caleb laid the foal down on a bed of straw, wrapping him in a fresh blanket. The little one let out a soft sigh, too weak to stand, but no longer crying. The mare walked in slowly, her hooves thudding softly on the wooden floor. She didn't bolt. Didn't panic. She stayed near her foal, lowering her head to nuzzle his side, her breath warm and steady. Caleb watched, his heart pounding, not from fear now, but from awe. She had risked everything to protect her baby. And somehow, they'd made it through. He grabbed a bucket and filled it with fresh water, setting it near her. "Here you go, girl," he said softly, backing away to give her space. She sniffed the water cautiously, then drank. Her muscles began to relax. The trembling eased. It was the first moment of peace they'd had in days. Caleb sank onto a nearby bale of hay, resting the rifle across his lap. His hands were shaking. Not from adrenaline, but from the weight of it all. The chase. The fear. The sheer miracle that they were still breathing. "You're tougher than most folks I know," he murmured, watching her stand guard over her foal. "You don't even know how strong you are." The lantern flickered gently in the corner, casting a warm glow across the stall. Outside, the forest was silent. The wolves had fallen back, at least for now. Inside the barn, the three of them, man, mare, and foal, sat in the stillness, sharing one unspoken truth. They had survived the night. But this was only the beginning. The sun was just beginning to rise, stretching soft amber light across the barn floor. Dust floated in the warm beams like tiny spirits dancing in the silence. Caleb hadn't slept, but he didn't feel tired. Not yet. He watched the mare, still unnamed in his mind, though he was already calling her Hope, as she stood vigil beside her foal. The little one, whom Caleb quietly referred to as Brave, was still curled in the straw, breathing slow, his legs tucked awkwardly beneath him. But he was alive. That was enough for now. Caleb moved slowly, stepping into the stall with a clean cloth soaked in warm water. Hope stiffened slightly, ears swiveling toward him. Her muscles tensed. "It's okay," he said gently, crouching a few feet away. "I'm just here to help." She didn't back away. He took that as permission. Kneeling beside Brave, he began wiping away the dried blood and grime from the foal's coat. His hands moved carefully, his voice soft and steady as he murmured reassurances. Hope hovered just behind him. She didn't interfere, but she watched every move. "You did good, little guy," Caleb whispered. "You held on. That's what matters." When he finished, he turned his attention to Hope. She was still matted in mud, with cuts along her flanks from the rope and brush. He reached toward her slowly, holding the cloth out in front of him like an offering. She didn't move. Then, slowly, she dipped her head. Caleb wiped along her shoulder, brushing away days of dirt and pain. Her breath was hot against his arm, but she didn't flinch. "You've been through hell," he said. "But you're not alone now." The two of them, rancher and Mustang, shared that moment in quiet stillness. No threats. No fear. Just the beginning of something that neither of them had felt in a long time. Trust. Outside, the ranch was waking. Birds chirped. The sky turned from lavender to gold. But inside the barn, the world felt still and sacred. Hope stepped forward as Caleb stood, her nose brushing lightly against his sleeve. It wasn't an accident. It was a thank you. And for Caleb, that meant more than words ever could. By the third day, Brave began to stir with purpose. His legs still trembled, but there was strength now, newfound, fragile, and determined. Caleb had watched enough foals to know the difference between surviving and trying. This little one wasn't just hanging on anymore. He was fighting to rise. It was just after noon when it happened. Caleb stepped into the barn carrying a fresh pail of water when he saw Brave push himself upright. His skinny legs wobbled like twigs in the wind, and for a moment, he swayed. But then, he stood. Hope lifted her head from the hay, ears alert, eyes wide. Caleb froze mid-step, watching as Brave took one shaky step forward. Then another. And then he fell, right into his mother's side. But she didn't flinch. She turned and nudged him gently, her body a soft wall to lean on. "That's it, little guy," Caleb said softly. "Just keep trying." Later that afternoon, he decided it was time. He opened the barn doors slowly, letting the warm spring air roll in. The paddock was enclosed, safe, and lined with soft grass. A good place for a first step into the world. He didn't have to ask Hope twice. She stepped forward the moment she smelled the outside. Brave followed close behind, stepping carefully onto the sunlit dirt. Caleb watched from the gate, arms crossed, heart full. Brave stumbled once. Twice. Then stood straight, squinting at the brightness of the day. He let out a small, squeaky whinny, and trotted clumsily toward the far side of the paddock. Hope stayed close, her movements cautious but more fluid now. Her body no longer shivered with fear. She no longer scanned the sky with every step. Here, in this place, something inside her had begun to settle. Caleb smiled as Brave chased a butterfly across the field, nearly tripping over his own legs. "You're free," he said under his breath. "And you don't even know it yet." The wind was soft. The sky was open. The wolves were a memory, for now. Inside this fence, there was space to breathe. To heal. To hope. For several days, life on the ranch moved with a quiet rhythm. Each morning, Caleb would find Brave already standing, sometimes even pawing gently at the stall gate, eager to step into the light. Hope, though more reserved, would follow, her steps confident, her ears no longer pinned back in fear. There was a peace to their routine. Brave explored the paddock with awkward energy, kicking at clumps of dirt and racing imaginary foes. Hope grazed along the fence line, never too far from her foal, but more relaxed each day. Caleb had begun reinforcing the ranch's perimeter, not because he expected immediate danger, but because he couldn't forget what he saw in the woods. The wolves might have stayed behind the trees, but he knew their nature. They were patient. That evening, as the sky shifted to pink and orange, Caleb leaned against the paddock gate, sipping from a chipped enamel mug. He watched Brave stumble in circles while Hope chewed lazily on a patch of grass nearby. "You're both doing better than I could have hoped," he said aloud, though they didn't answer. "You're healing." A gust of wind passed through the trees. The barn creaked. Somewhere out in the woods, a branch cracked, loud and sharp. Hope's head snapped up. Brave froze in place. Caleb set the mug down and reached instinctively for the rifle leaning against the fence. Silence followed. Nothing moved. No growls. No howls. But Caleb felt it. That tightness in the air. That invisible pressure, like a storm building just over the horizon. Hope stayed still, eyes locked on the tree line. She didn't bolt, but her stance changed. Protective again. Ready. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Maybe it's nothing," he said. But his hand didn't leave the rifle. He waited until dusk swallowed the paddock before guiding them back into the barn. Brave protested with a short whinny. He had grown to love the open air, but Hope didn't argue. She knew. Inside, Caleb bolted the doors and hung lanterns in every corner. Their glow cast dancing shadows across the walls, but it pushed back the dark, just enough. He settled beside the stall, rifle across his lap once more. Because even when peace returns, some part of you remembers the wolves. And some part always watches the dark. The moon was high, casting silver light across the fields. Inside the barn, all was quiet, at least for now. Caleb sat in a worn wooden chair just outside the stall. The lantern nearest him flickered faintly, its soft glow painting his face in amber and shadow. His rifle rested across his lap. Not just for comfort, tonight, it was precaution. Hope and Brave were asleep, curled together in the corner of the stall. Brave let out tiny, contented breaths. Hope's ears twitched every so often, even in rest, always half listening for danger. Caleb was drifting near the edge of sleep when it happened. A howl. Long distant. Low. He froze. Hope jerked upright, her eyes snapping open. Brave stirred beneath her, letting out a soft, uncertain whimper. Then came a second howl, closer. Caleb stood slowly, moving to the barn door. He pushed it open a few inches and peered into the night. The fields lay quiet under the moonlight, but the shadows near the tree line seemed to shift, to breathe. And then, he saw them. Eyes. 6. Maybe more. Low to the ground. Watching. "They're back," he muttered, stepping away from the door and bolting it tight. Hope was already on her feet, placing herself between the door and her foal. Her muscles tightened. Her body stilled. She remembered this fear. She had lived it before. Caleb moved quickly, lighting the remaining lanterns, casting strong pools of light across the barn. He hung 2 more near the windows, hoping the brightness would buy them time. He loaded the rifle slowly, deliberately, then settled in again by the door. "I won't let them get through," he said quietly, not sure if he was reassuring Hope or himself. Outside, the howls echoed again. Closer now. One of the tin can alarms Caleb had strung up near the fence line rattled, a soft metallic jingle that sent a chill down his spine. He gripped the rifle tighter. The barn had become more than shelter. It was now a last line of defense. And if the wolves crossed that fence, they'd have to face something just as wild, just as determined. A man who had something worth protecting. The wind picked up outside, rustling the trees with a restless energy. Caleb stood motionless by the door, rifle ready, eyes locked on the faint outlines of movement beyond the windows. Hope stood like stone, ears pinned back, nostrils flared. She didn't tremble, she braced. Brave tucked beneath her, eyes wide, sensing that the peace he'd known for days was gone. Another howl split the silence, this time just beyond the fence. Then came the low growl. Closer. Caleb stepped to the side window and lifted the lantern. Through the glass, he caught a glimpse, several shapes pacing along the fence line. Wolves. Their bodies moved with that unnerving stillness predators have right before a strike. He threw open the side window and fired a warning shot. The sound echoed across the fields like thunder. For a moment, everything stopped. The wolves vanished into the brush. Caleb listened, heart pounding, breath held. Nothing. He lowered the rifle, backed away from the window. "They'll test us again," he whispered. And they did. Twice more, the cans rattled. Once, he thought he saw one dart between trees, just past the lantern light. But they never crossed the line. Still, he stayed up all night, moving between windows, keeping the fire in the stove burning, keeping watch over Hope and Brave. Inside the barn, time passed like molasses, slow, thick, tense. Hope never lay down. She remained beside Brave, her shadow towering over him even in rest. She'd survived the forest, the ropes, the hunger. She wouldn't surrender here. At dawn, the light crept over the horizon, scattering long shadows across the barnyard. With the morning sun came silence. No howls. No movement. No eyes. The wolves were gone, for now. Caleb opened the barn doors slowly, rifle still in hand, stepping out into the dew-soaked earth. He walked the fence line, checked every string, every tin can, every footprint in the dirt. They had come within feet. But they hadn't crossed. When he returned to the barn, Hope finally relaxed. Her muscles eased. She let out a low sigh, and for the first time since the night began, she blinked slowly, like a soldier lowering her sword. Caleb sat down beside her, exhaling hard. "We made it," he said. "Not just through the night. Through the fear. Together." The days that followed were calm. No more howls. No more glowing eyes at the edge of the woods. Just sunlight, soft breezes, and the steady rhythm of hooves in the paddock. Caleb still kept his rifle nearby and checked the fences twice a day, but something inside him had eased. The wolves might return one day, but for now, they were just ghosts in the tree-line. Hope had changed. She moved with grace now, her coat smooth and gleaming in the sun. She no longer flinched at Caleb's footsteps. Sometimes, when he brushed her mane, she leaned into his hand. And Brave had become a whirlwind. The once fragile foal now galloped in wide, clumsy circles, chasing the ranch's chickens, his tail flicking with joy. He still fell sometimes, but he always got back up, snorting in frustration, then trying again. "You've got more fire than most men I know," Caleb chuckled one morning as Brave charged across the paddock, barely missing a feeding trough. Hope watched her foal run, her stance calm, no longer guarded. For the first time, her eyes didn't dart toward the forest. She trusted the ground beneath her. That afternoon, as Caleb fixed a loose hinge on the gate, he looked out across the horizon and spotted something he hadn't expected. Mustangs. A wild herd. Far off, moving through the open plain, their manes whipping in the wind, their bodies glowing with freedom. There were at least a dozen, maybe more, running along the far ridge. Caleb stood still, his hammer forgotten in his hand. Hope lifted her head too. She saw them. Her ears perked. Her body shifted forward. Brave trotted up beside her, panting from his latest adventure. She looked down at him. Then back at the horizon. Caleb knew. It was almost time. The next morning was bright and still. The kind of morning where the sky stretches endlessly, and the grass shimmers with dew. Caleb stood by the paddock fence, one hand resting on the wood, the other lightly gripping the reins of his horse. Hope and Brave stood nearby. Caleb had spent the night wrestling with the decision. Every part of him wanted to keep them, this mare who had trusted him with her life, and this foal who had grown up under his care. But the wild wasn't just their past. It was their future. "I know you'd stay if I asked," he said quietly, looking at Hope. "But it wouldn't be right." He opened the paddock gate. Hope didn't move at first. Brave nuzzled her side, sensing something was different. Caleb stepped aside and motioned toward the open plains. "I saw them," he whispered. "Your herd. They're not far." Hope took a step forward. Then another. Brave hesitated, his head turning toward Caleb, then back to his mother. Caleb crouched down beside him, placing a hand gently on the foal's neck. "You're ready," he said, eyes misting. "You both are." He gave Brave one last stroke between the ears and stepped back. Hope walked forward, her hooves light, steady. When she reached the edge of the property, she paused and looked back. Her dark eyes met Caleb's one final time. He raised a hand. "Go on, girl. Take care of him." Brave trotted to her side, bumping her with his nose. Together, they crossed the invisible line between captivity and freedom, their silhouettes framed by the golden horizon. Caleb watched until they were just specks in the distance. Until they vanished. He didn't cry. Not exactly. But something in him cracked open, a space where loss met peace, and where love let go. He turned back toward the barn, the ranch quiet again. But not empty. Because they had left something behind. Hope. And Brave. And Caleb knew, wherever they ran, whatever came next, he'd never forget them.